when we like went into the ultrasound and everything, I knew right away because the ultrasound tech like wasn't showing us the monitor and we weren't hearing a heartbeat. And the ultrasound tech will never tell you anything like the doctor will, but I knew. So like we finished that, excuse me, went into the other room and the first words out of the doctor's mouth was, "There's no heartbeat." So
Welcome back to the Describe Your World podcast. Today I have a very special guest. This is my sister-in-law, Jackie. First time on the podcast, which is really exciting. So we have a lot to kind of go over and talk about, mainly your story and your experiences. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure I'll learn some new things. So how are you feeling, Jackie?
overall, I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Not bad. I'm ready to record. I'm in that headspace. So looking forward to whatever new things there are to learn. Normally, what I like to do, I'm sure you've heard a couple of episodes, but I'll turn it over to you and kind of let you talk about early life first. So if you want to just start out childhood, parent stuff, education, whatever you feel is relevant.
Okay. Well, if anyone's paid attention, like prior episodes, you got a little bit of that from my sister, which our experiences are somewhat different because I'm 7 years older. But I guess the short version is like, let's see, I was born in Ohio, and then my parents got married when I was 4, I want to say, and then we moved up to Michigan. So I was an only child for 7 years till Catherine came around. But anyway, we moved to Michigan. We started going to church when I was like, I don't know, maybe 8 or so, maybe even 9. I don't know. I feel like I have a really different story than Catherine, but my childhood wasn't that interesting other than we were like super sheltered. I kid you not. There's so many things I was so sheltered about, but that's okay. So I ended up, well, my parents got divorced when I turned 18. Well, before I turned, no, I was already 18. I couldn't remember. So I moved out like shortly after. So unfortunately, kind of left Catherine behind. But yeah, so that's the short version of it for a little bit.
What do you think about, I know you said you were, 3 or 4 when your parents got married, and then your experience being very different, but you also said your childhood was fairly uneventful.
Yeah.
So when you say your childhood was fairly normal, what do you mean? Is it just your standard American dream childhood?
No. Okay, let me expand on that a little bit. So my parents should have never been together. They had a very toxic relationship. They constantly like fought and argued. So when they finally told me, "Hey, we're getting divorced," I was like, "Finally!" Like, geez, you guys. I think in their minds they were doing the thing like, "Oh, it's better to stay together for the kids." But just for anyone that needs to hear it, it's not. It's really not. It's so much better to co-parent, or at least try to co-parent, like separately, and be the best versions of yourselves if you can. Speaking as a divorcee myself, like, it's better. So that part was, I mean, kids' parents fight, but it wasn't a healthy relationship.
So how did that affect your development as a child? What was it like to kind of live in that environment where the two were not blending very well?
I would honestly say the first thing that like threw me for a loop was like my parents slept in separate bedrooms, and I didn't know that was weird. Like, me and Catherine's friend Bethany, she came over. Bethany used to come over all the time. She's like my childhood friend. And she came over to stay the night, and she's like, "Your parents sleep in separate rooms? Like, why?" And I was like, "Does everyone's parents do that?" Like, so that was kind of interesting. As far as like the development part, like my dad traveled a lot for work, so he would be gone for like several days or like a week at a time or something. So my mom did a lot of like the parenting while he was gone. So I kind of learned, I guess, if I needed something or whatever, like I typically had to go to her because he might be gone at the time or something. I don't know if that made any sense, but.
course. Everything makes sense. There are no wrong answers. So I'm curious, as a mother yourself, obviously you have kids and you're married. So what do you model yourself after if it was such a tumultuous and your dad wasn't around as much? So do you take kind of everything after your mom, or are you sort of correcting some of the mistakes you picked up?
Oh man. So my this, just for disclosure for anyone that doesn't know, this is my second marriage. I just got married last July. Um so I remember when Chris was my current husband, when we were going through like our marriage counseling through our church, one of the questions like in the workbook we had to do was like, what do you want to do to like mirror your parents' relationship or something to that extent? And I was like, absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. So I kind of, from that aspect, I kind of learned what not to do. And I also had like my first marriage to kind of look at as well, because it was honestly really similar. Like we just fought, like no disrespect to my ex-husband at all. We get along great now. But it was also a toxic relationship. Like we just weren't good together. But now we're like, we've been co-parenting Emmett and Grace, our son and daughter, for geez, like 5 years now, which is crazy to think about. And like we are so good at like co-parenting separately, but if we were together, it's a whole different story. So it's kind of funky, but anyway, to kind of circle back with like me and Chris, like his parents do have a really good relationship, so at least he has that to like look back on. And I don't know, I want to be a good model for Emmett and Grace, and like if God blesses us with any more living children, I want to be a good example for them. Like me and Chris, we don't fight. We still haven't had like a fight. We might disagree on some things, but like it's not a big deal. So I think it's important to find someone that you can truly like you can get along with, and even if you don't agree, like you can disagree, but not without it like blowing up in your face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious too. We can circle back because I do want to spend some time about with your relationship and kind of some of the differences you have. But I'm also curious, what shift did you notice whenever Catherine came into the picture? So you went from being an only child to having a little sister, and the age gap. I mean, I understand the age gap is fairly normal for a lot of people, but still, 7 years is a lot. So obviously there were changes. So how do you feel about that?
Honestly, I think like one of the things that's even followed me to adulthood, like I was so used to like getting what I wanted because I was an only child, and it was all about me. And then, Catherine was born and I had to learn to share, and like, the focus wasn't on me. And like, to be 100% honest, like sharing is still something I struggle with, like as an adult, like, so, to any like parents with like single like children out there, like please teach your kids to share because doesn't get easier like as an adult. But so yeah, I was 7 when she was born, so it was a big adjustment. I mean, it was all of a big adjustment because we had like just moved to Michigan. And I transferred schools in second grade, I think, and she was born between like the summer of kindergarten to first grade for me. Um, and then like as she got older, I thought I was too cool for her, So like anytime Bethany came over or anyone else came over, I would be like, "Oh, Catherine, like stop following me around." Like, because she's just doing the typical like little sister thing. Like she just wants to see what we're doing. And I see that with Emmett and Grace right now. And I'm just like, "Oh, you're the worst. Like get out of here." Which thankfully it's not like that anymore. We get along really well now, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm kind of coming from the perspective of being an only child myself. I have a half sister, but the age difference is so significant that I don't even feel like we're related at
Yeah.
all, because I don't have a relationship with her. So it's very interesting. And I think if another child had come into the picture 7 to 10 years after I was born, it would have just been, it would almost feel like a foreign object. Like you're sort of still in your own lane, and now there's this other thing. Whereas if another child were to come in 2 years difference, I would feel very like a companion, like bond with
Right.
them. Was it difficult, being in the midst of that divorce with your parents, having to take on some of the responsibility of looking after your sister?
I would honestly probably say no because, excuse me, like I said, I was 18 by the time they were getting divorced, so there was no custody battle over me. I was a legal adult. Um, and as Catherine has described, my mom is a interesting person. I so I didn't get along with her that well, which is a reason I was moving out. And, my dad moved. I think when he first moved out, he moved to an apartment not too far away. But I just, yeah, I was like, I'm 18 now. I'm gonna be an adult and go do adult things. So, and me and Catherine, like, our relationship was better, but not even. It wasn't close to where it got to once we were both truly adults.
Right. It's almost like you kind of rediscovered, you kind of built a friendship out of, what was a very confusing sibling relationship, which is very nice because now you have a deeper and more connected relationship.
Definitely.
I am curious about some of your awkward phases and experiences as a teenager. I've heard things. I've heard about some of the music choices and stylistic choices.
All right, yeah, let's hit it. Okay, so for anyone that knows me, I was literally obsessed with a band called Jump 5. So they're a Christian like pop group, if you will. Um, and don't get me wrong, like Jump 5, if you're listening, I still love you guys. You're still so they will forever like hold a special place in my heart, or like anyone who knew me during my formative like teenage years, anytime like they might hear of Jump 5 or something, like Jackie. So yeah, I had like a whole wall of them in my bedroom. I like printed off pictures that I randomly found online. I had a signed poster and stuff. um I ended up making it to 3 of their concerts, and I met them one time thanks to Catherine. Catherine won a jump roping contest, so we got to meet them, which is so cool. Um, so that, yeah, I was definitely like I wouldn't say like your typical awkward teenager. I was very immature. I will say that about myself. I was definitely very immature. Um, Fashion choices. You know those choker necklaces that have like made a comeback? Wish I would have kept mine. I had one I wore for like, I kid you not, years till it broke, and it had an ichthus on it, the Jesus fish. Um, I probably had it from like 12 to like 14 or so. I don't know. Um, Other fashion choices. Nothing like super sticks out in my brain for that, but I was definitely unique, for lack of a.
It might it might be a different time period entirely, but when did the colorful hair come in?
Oh, that was much later, much later.
Okay.
So like when I went to college and I graduated from an interpreter training program, and we couldn't have unnatural colored hair. So I have been dyeing my hair since I was 16, but I didn't start dyeing it like unnatural bold colors, if you will, until probably right after I graduated college, so maybe 2018, 19, something like that. No going back now.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting how times have changed. I know that a lot of important like professional STEM roles and other professional roles 10 years ago, 15 years ago weren't very kind to things like tattoos and the hair color. And I even remember in private school, one of my friends who was in high school with me, she came in on the first day of school with like platinum blonde with like black streaks on the tips, and they sent her home first day, told her she couldn't come back until she dyed her whole head like brown. So I mean, maybe that's more of a private school thing, but it is kind of interesting how things have changed, and now people are a lot more welcoming with the different looks and people's stylistic choices.
It is kind of crazy because I currently work in corporate America, and I have like hot pink hair. I've got a nose ring, a septum ring, and I have a tattoo on my arm too, but you can't really tell. Like they don't care. It's so
Yeah.
crazy, but it's amazing to me. I'm so thankful because like for me, like dyeing my hair, it sounds stupid to most people probably, but it's like a true expression for me. Like I get my hair dyed once a month, and it's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering too, because understandably, Jump Five, as much as we are appreciative of their stamp that they left with you, like you have other outlets like hair color and ways to express yourself. So where does your sense of expression come from? Like, what are you trying to communicate to people?
That I don't care if you like it or not. I'm gonna do it. Like,
You're unapologetically you.
yeah. Like I honestly get bored with my hair like being the same color for a while, which is why I dye it so frequently. And I naturally have dark brown hair like Catherine, so you can see my roots really easily when they start to grow in. But and like I have facial piercing, so it's just my dad is very open about the fact he doesn't like body piercings or anything, which is fine. That's his thing. But I'm just like, okay, you don't have to like it, Dad. Like that's my choice. So it's definitely just it's for me and no one else type thing.
I want to kind of move back a little bit because I do want to have a time to talk about your relationships. So I don't know if you want to kind of start with your first marriage or if you want to say anything else about other relationships too. But I'm curious, kind of what your understanding of love is and sort of how those things came together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so my ex-husband's name is Eric. We got married when we were 20 years old. um, So honestly, the whole thing was kind of crazy. Everyone told me it was back then also, but like I was 20, I wasn't going to listen to anyone. So we met on St. Patrick's Day in 2010, and we got married by August of that same year. So we met and got married within a 5 month span, which is literally insane. 10 out of 10 do not advise for anyone. Because we didn't have enough time to like truly get to know one another, and he was active duty in the army when we met, so we didn't physically get to spend like that much time together in person because he was up here on leave when we met. By up here I mean Michigan, and he then had to go back down to Texas. So it was we we were kind of doomed from the start for a lot of different reasons. So like I am a Christian. Like I believe Jesus died on the cross to save us from our sins, and that's how we get into heaven. Eric is an atheist. Um, so for anyone that's familiar like with the Bible or like how it kind of feels about relationships, like you're not supposed to be unequally yoked, so to speak. So meaning Eric doesn't even believe in God, and here I am. It's like I love Jesus. So it was granted that I was not at a very strong point in my faith at that point in my life. Like I hadn't turned away, but it wasn't a main focus for me, which definitely played a factor. But then I am a full believer that no one should get married before the age 25 because your brain's not fully formed until you're 25. So like it was just the whole like we were so young and we just didn't know each other very well. So again, no disrespect to him, but we just weren't good together from from the start. We like when we got married in August, I ended up moving down to Texas in September, so like a month after we got married, and we were like fighting right from the get-go. So it was not it was not a healthy relationship by any means.
So one thing that's kind of interesting about me is I've had those experiences where parents or friends or coworkers will say, that it's probably not a good match, or here are the reasons why you shouldn't be with this person. One particular instance, I was working at a college in computer services, and I was dating someone, and one of my colleagues from the college was like, what do you like about her? And I really couldn't answer. I was like, I'm not sure. I don't know if I like very much about her. So kind of those kind of things. And so how did you respond to that kind of harsh criticism of the person you were in love with?
So I was definitely, this was a very like rebellious point in my life. So I was definitely like, I don't care what anyone thinks, like we love each other, like it'll be fine. Um, pretty much every single person in my life was like, Jackie, you are literally insane. Like this is a stupid idea. But Yeah, it was just you know, when you're young and to be completely honest, like I hadn't had a serious relationship prior to Eric. So I also didn't know any better. And like the example I had of my parents, it was normal to fight all the time. So like I didn't know any better. I didn't know there was such a thing as a healthy relationship where you guys just didn't argue every day. Like 100%. I didn't know that was a thing. So I think that played a factor as well.
And there are a lot of people too who will, you know, if they're spiritual or religious, they'll marry someone and sort of ignore the partner's view on religion, or if they're atheist or agnostic. And a lot of times it doesn't cause such a huge rift, but I do think that fundamentally it is really challenging to be with someone who has a fundamentally different belief about God or religion. So how was that experience, and how did that kind of wedge between the two of you?
Well, I very distinctly remember Christmas Eve that year in 2010. Like, I found a church down there that I wanted to go see the Christmas Eve service. And, like, we only had one working vehicle at the time. So, like, Eric drove me there to go to the service. And I was like, aren't you going to come in with me? And he's like, no. And I was so upset. Like, I just expected him to. And he's like, I'm not setting foot in a church. So that was like our first like really big fight about that. Um, and then like later on when we had Emmett, our firstborn, like it was always a struggle because like I wanted to take Emmett to church and I wanted him, and I was going to church like without Eric prior to having Emmett. Um, so that was always a fight. He's like, I don't want him being brainwashed and all this stuff. Yeah, but I'm like, this is important to me. So that was always a source of tension as well.
Yeah, I think that it's very true for people who are listening, and this is from personal experience as well, as you're saying that, you know, if someone you're in a relationship with, number one, doesn't believe fundamentally the same thing, you know, maybe there's a point at which you can overlook it, but all of the other ways that that impacts the relationship, like raising children, or schedules and activities, or just like prayer, things that you do on daily basis, it's a pretty big impact, and it really does make it difficult to kind of blend and build a family with someone like that. And no disrespect to people who don't believe. Obviously, I don't hate anyone who's a non-believer. It's just it's a lifestyle choice and a preference, and it's my faith and my religion. But I think that relationships that aren't sort of built on the same core values are sort of destined to fall apart at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
So you were married how long with Eric?
So we were together 7 years before we called it quits.
And what are some of the things that you, I mean, obviously, and again, I'll reiterate that we're not taking a shot at Eric
Yeah.
in any way, no disrespect intended. So what are some of the things that you notice that are extremely different between that relationship versus, you know, your eventual husband and your husband, Chris?
Oh man, it's literally every difference you could ever think of. Like, well, first of all, when I decided to start dating again after I got divorced, like I had it in my brain that like my faith is of utmost importance to me, and I'm not even going to give someone a chance if they don't share my faith, you know. And again, I have nothing against people who like don't share my same faith, but I can't have a relationship with someone like that, like a intimate relationship, not like a friendship, of course. Um, so honestly, when I first started dating again, like the first question I would, other than like, "Hey, how are you?" to like break the ice, would be like, "Tell me about your faith." Like, because if they didn't list themselves as Christian, it was swipe left, you know. Um, sorry, I kind of deviated from your question.
No, that's okay. No, feel free to go off on a tangent. I'm down.
So differences. So like that's a really really big one. And Eric is a ginger, so he's very not stereotype, but he's like very quick to anger about anything. And Chris is like the most patient man I've ever met in my entire life, like to a point where it's kind of annoying sometimes. um, but it's just like, you know, like Chris jumped into it with Emmett and Grace already. Um, and he's like so patient and understanding with them, as to where with Eric, you know, he just got frustrated like the second like Emmett would cry or something like that. And like me and Chris can talk about things without it becoming escalated, or you know, if I'm having like a really bad day, I can just go up to Chris and like ask him to like hug me until I, you know, for as long as I want. Like it's just it's crazy how different they are. I want like I truly did not believe a relationship like this existed. Like I really didn't. I thought people made it up when they said they're like, "Oh, like I'm married to my best friend." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." But I get it now.
What kind of a fighter are you when problems do come up? Or I mean, in either situation, are you pretty hot headed, or are you pretty calm and laid back about it?
No. I've always said like if I get to a point where I'm physically like escalating my voice and yelling, you have really, really upset me, because it takes a lot to get me to raise my voice. I can talk pretty calmly for quite a while. But I'm definitely the type of person that's like, we have to figure this out now. Like I want to come up with a solution now. I don't want to give you time to like cool down and like think about it. Which was also a big problem with me and Eric, because he was always like, I want some time, I want some space. And I'm like, no, must fix now. So that was hard. But yeah, I'm definitely like, let's figure out the problem. Let's figure out a solution and move on.
Yeah, I feel like I'm fairly similar. I would rather address it. Well, I won't say that. I'll say that there are times when I want to not talk about it and move away, but then I think the majority of times I would rather address it immediately and resolve it, be done with it, kind of move forward. I don't have really long extended periods of heavy emotion. So I might feel intense emotion for a moment once there's an issue, but after that passes within a few minutes, I'm pretty calm and it doesn't really come back, which is good. So I know a lot of people, you know, if they feel an intense emotion, it needs to be there for a while and they need to process it. So there are different styles, and it's always very interesting finding the one that balances the best with you. So it sounds like you are fortunate enough to have that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's talk about parenthood a little bit. So your first experience with Emmett. So what are some of the things that you remember the most about being pregnant and then your experience having him?
Oh man. So with Emmett, I think I was 25 when I found out I was pregnant with him, maybe 24, I don't remember. But I was experiencing morning, aka all day sickness for up to 7 months with Emmett, which was rough because I was in school. I wasn't in the ITP. When I say ITP, I mean interpreter training program. I wasn't in it yet, but I was like preparing to do that. And I was working at Home Depot in the paint department. So I was, you know, like slugging around paint cans all day on a concrete floor, like while I was pregnant, which I'm not complaining about. I loved Home Depot. But just another added, not a stressor, but, you know, something else. And then Eric was just not the type of person who was like excited or really like super supportive throughout the pregnancy. So like that was harder as well. And then like with Grace, Eric told me he wanted a divorce while I was 4 months pregnant. So like that sucked. Like I just couldn't enjoy that pregnancy at all, you know. And I was like in the ITP, which is a super demanding program. And I wasn't working. But so yeah, that was really hard. But with what kind of parenting stuff are you asking about, I guess? Because that's
Yeah, I guess specifically, what are some of the differences between the two? So what are some of the things you learned going through it the first time?
like between Emmett and Grace, you mean?
Yeah, between the two.
Let me see. So they're both really like independent. They've always been like, no, I want to do it. Like even when they very clearly cannot do the thing they're trying to do. The biggest difference I remember though, it was like when Emmett was a baby and like starting to have solid foods and stuff, he never ever wanted to be spoon fed. That kid never had pureed baby food a day in his life. So he wasn't about it. He was all about like the puffs and like whatever else he could grab and like feed himself. Grace to
Mhm.
this day will still let you feed her if you want to or if you will, and she's about to be 5. So that was like the biggest difference I noticed when they were little. Um, Other than that, I think the biggest thing, Emmett signed before he talked. His first sign was milk, which is this, by the way. And Grace talked first. Her first word was mama. So that,
Hmm.
and Emmett did sign a lot more as a baby than Grace did. I think because like I was in the middle of a divorce, like, you know, right after she was born, I was not so focused on that. Um, but yeah, they're both, well, now Grace is still like very much the whole like, I'm a princess. You must carry me everywhere and like baby me. Emmett's like, I'm this big kid and he's into wrestling now. So he thinks he's like the strongest kid in the whole world. So it's funny like the differences there where Emmett's like super independent, like I want to do all the things, and Grace is like I'm a princess, you know.
Yeah, I've spent a little bit of time with them, and they're very interesting, very both sweet kids, very emotive. But I do notice that Emmett's a lot more expressive and sort of wearing his feelings on his sleeves, and Grace is a lot more like bundled up and like work to understand what I'm feeling, kind of.
Yeah, Grace does take a little more work. She'll open up after a little while, but she is a little more closed off at first than Emmett.
Which one would you say is more like you?
Grace.
So
Um,
it takes a little work to get everything out from you.
Yeah, like from the divorce, I did learn to be like really independent, which is something I really didn't have before. So I am kind of thankful for that in that aspect. But I'm definitely like, at least now with Chris, I'm like, you have turned me into a spoiled princess. So I can relate on that aspect.
Are you more extroverted or
Oh,
introverted?
introverted for sure, for sure.
You much rather be like in a little cave, kind of away from people.
Yeah, like I work full time at home and I love it. Like my coworkers are great, but I don't want to go into the office 5 days a week. Perfectly fine messaging them on Teams all day. That's fine with me.
Yeah, same. I've been at home since COVID really kind of started because our with ORC they were so worried about the repercussions of socializing right when the pandemic kind of ramped up that they kind of sent people home immediately, and they were like, you know, we don't want anybody in the offices. If you have to be in, vaxxed, mask, everything, like super strict and tight about it. So, and it was not a bad experience for me. Like I understand obviously from a large macro kind of perspective COVID was a horrible experience for people, but for me personally, it wasn't that bad because going home to work from home was really nice. You know, not having the commute, being able to be rested, and sort of as an introvert, my energy comes from being alone and not interacting with that many people. So I didn't notice very much with the pandemic. It was kind of just the same for me because I didn't get out very much anyway. Um, and then there were a lot of other benefits, just not putting mileage on my car and other small things that kind of adds up.
Yeah. And like with that, like I work for a call center, so I literally just talk to people all day. So by the end of my shift, I'm like, I don't want to socialize with anyone. I don't want to do anything. So that's it definitely plays into the whole introvert part thing.
How do you, I mean, this is something that's kind of similar for me because when I was doing help desk, I was on the phone literally all day. I was just talking to people while I was fixing their technical issues. So, how do you feel about that? Just being constantly connected to someone by voice?
So I've been at this job for 4.5 years now. So I have a pretty good understanding of what I'm doing. So I think that's better now because I can like it's very rare that I'm like thrown for a loop, you know, like crap, I don't know what happened with this policy, you know, but so I feel like most of the time it's pretty okay. Of course, every once in a while you'll get like your escalated callers that no matter what you do, they're still upset. But I'm not a supervisor, so thankfully I can be like, okay, you want to you want to talk to a supervisor now? Here you go. So that's honestly like the hardest part for me, because when I do get someone that's like, just, it's not even if they're upset because we messed up, like I empathize with that. Like, that's okay. I get it. We messed up. Let's fix it. I will help you get there. But it's just those people that call in that are just like jerks for no reason at all, that just like get under my skin and ruin my day. So that's
Hmm.
really hard for me to like disconnect when it's like people like that. But other than that, overall, like, I'm not complaining. I like my job. I work for a great company, so I have no complaints there. But it's just, I wish people would be nice. Like, why is it hard?
Yeah, that was, I think help desk was really hard because mainly because not only am I trying to fix something that's wrong on the computer, but while I'm fixing it, I also have to be talking to the person.
Hmm.
So if they're irate or just extremely upset about whatever's going on, I'm kind of trying to manage their emotion and what they're kind of saying to me while trying to figure out what's wrong with the computer.
Yeah,
And that's a lot. That's a lot to manage from 9 to 5. And then I felt like until help desk was done, I felt like I would kind of finish at the end of the day and just be exhausted and
yeah,
just kind of want to shut everything off for a little bit.
yeah, for sure. For like about a 3 month period, I was working 4 10-hour shifts a week. So I was just dealing with that for like 10 hours a day instead of 8, and that was exhausting. I don't 10 hour shift again.
So what are some of your hobbies when you're not recuperating from all the exhaustive conversations? What do you like to do?
I feel like I get asked this a lot, and I literally never know how to answer. Um, so I don't, to be honest, I don't do much. I hang out with Chris if we have the kids, hang out with them. Um, I was into Pokemon Go for quite a while, which I do still play it, but then I discovered there's a The Office game, like, for my phone. So that's currently what I've been into. I don't like read or anything, but Chris and I do watch a lot of The Office. So we do that. But we also recently, or I just turned it on. I've only seen Parks and Rec through one time, and I was like, I want to watch it again. So I turned that back on. I'm like, this is pretty great. Might have to watch this some more. So I would say that's kind of what we do to unwind, is like we watch shows, and I really like Schitt's Creek as well. I don't really remember how many times I've seen that, but yeah, I would say mostly just watching shows and playing dumb games on my phone.
And then the occasional like Nerf gun fight.
Oh, yeah. We haven't done that like since we moved to this house, but we do have a lot of Nerf guns. By we, I mean like we share them between like the kids, and we have, I kid you not, a box of 1,000 bullets. So once it warms up, we'll definitely like have to have a Nerf gun war outside now that we have room for it.
And there's also Hamilton.
Oh, Hamilton. I haven't watched Hamilton since last year. I was just saying to Chris, like, I need to rewatch it. I listened to it a lot though, so
Yeah, I guess it kind of, and I didn't expect it to happen, but it kind of at some point got old. Not old, but like
oh,
Catherine's seen it so many times that I think she finally kind of put it aside for a bit. And I mean, I've watched it, I mean, I've probably watched it half a dozen times, and I listened to a couple songs here and there, but not as big of a fan, but I definitely appreciate for what it is. I did really like Tick Tick Boom. I thought that one was really good. So some of Lynn's other projects I like just as much.
I have heard of Tick Tick Boom. I haven't seen it yet. Don't hate me, Lynn. Of course, the kids love Encanto, which Lynn wrote all the music for, and
Mhm.
Chris wanted to watch Moana recently because he hasn't seen it, and I'm like, of course it's good. Like, Lynn wrote the music for that too. Um, but yeah, I've seen Hamilton. I don't even know how many times. I literally watched it every single night for at least like 3 months straight. So I've
Wow.
probably seen it upwards of 100 times, and I will never tire of it.
You've got every line
Oh,
memorized.
100%. Yeah.
And you guys haven't seen it and like performed yet though, right?
No.
It's got to be like a big ticket item, like a Christmas thing.
Yeah, Chris was gonna buy me tickets like in 2021 for my birthday or something. But at that time we are also planning our wedding, and I was like, Hamilton will come back on tour. Like, let's pay for this wedding first, and then we'll circle back to that someday.
And it's weird too because seeing it in person is so different from watching the original cast. I noticed that was one thing I noticed about it, just seeing the performance, because obviously the characters, for me, really, I associate the character with the original cast and the Disney Plus special the first time I saw it. And I know those voices so well because I'm really an auditory learner. Like I hear things more so than I see or touch them, and I learn a lot better that way. But for example, I thought the Schuyler sisters that I saw in person were better than the original
Well,
cast. But for all of the other roles, I wasn't a fan. Like I didn't like Aaron Burr's, the actor who performed, and then I didn't like the guy who played Alexander very much.
oh my goodness, I know that would be a worry of mine that I wouldn't like it, like because it's not the original Broadway cast, and then it would ruin it for me, and I would be really upset. But if
Yeah.
if at some point they ever threw like the original cast back together, I would save up my money to see that.
I feel like you'd be paying $1,000 at least per ticket, but I mean, you might be able to see
Oh yeah,
it.
you definitely would for like really terrible seats, but
Yeah.
you could say,
No, it's cool though, and that's the nice thing about the theater too is there are options where people can see shows and not spend a ton of money. Obviously, we're not talking about Hamilton, but there are shows that are sort of up and coming and shows that have been around a while, and just the performance aspect of it is really special. You know, you get something that you can't get from hearing it on
yeah,
Spotify. So shows are cool. Shows are very nice. It's not something that I thought I would like before, but once I was dragged to a couple, I started getting more into it.
yeah. I really do like enjoy theater a lot, but it's just it can be expensive, so I haven't been to too many shows, but I do enjoy them a lot.
And where did ASL come in? So how is that significant and sort of your experience with learning it?
So this is really cliche, but it's the truth. So in like 2013, it must have been, I started watching Switched at Birth, which, if you don't know, it's a show with a lot of deaf actors in it. So they used ASL like quite a bit. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I'd like to learn that. And I was talking to Catherine about it. She's like, yeah, me too. So we started, and this was a point when Catherine and I had a good relationship. So we started the whole like trying to teach ourselves thing, which was a terrible idea because we learned everything wrong. Like we learned like the English signs for it. And like ASL doesn't use English word order, nor does it use like every single word. It's more concepts and phrases versus words. So we learned everything wrong. So when I started taking like formal classes in 2014, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to relearn everything because I just did it wrong. Um, but yeah, I mostly just started taking classes because I wanted to learn it. And then the like school I was going to, they have a really good interpreter training program. And I was like, well, I guess that's what I'm doing now. So I just continued with that and graduated in 2018 well, I was dual enrolled for my last year, so I graduated with a bachelor's and an associate's in American Sign Language Interpreting.
Well, that's fun. And I mean, I've seen you using it in person sometimes. I mean, I know that you and Catherine communicate that way. It's funny because I made a point at one point that I wanted to learn as much as I could just to be able to kind of have conversational interactions with it. So I got a few books and I learned a few phrases and watched a little bit on YouTube. And I started showing some of the words to Catherine, and she started correcting me. She's like, no, that's wrong. And so I didn't understand the regional
Oh
part
yeah.
of ASL at the time. The different places, they have totally different signs, totally different context. So I kind of had to start over and rethink because, obviously if I use it somewhere that they understand the signs to be different, it would just not work or not translate very well.
There definitely are, like, just like a spoken language, like there's accents, if you will. So there's definitely like if I were to go down to like see you guys and happen to meet like a deaf person there, I'm sure there's signs I'd be like, oh, I don't know what the heck that is. I've never seen that. Or there's like regional signs. Like there's ones that are local because I'm in the Lansing, Michigan area. There's ones that are local to Lansing, which can be said true about anywhere. So
Yeah, it's beautiful though. It's super. I mean, it's super important in the workforce. It's important to people who are deaf, and it is like learning a whole entirely new language, which at our age is tough.
Yeah.
Whenever you're an adult, it's so much harder to learn something like that versus if you were 5 or 6, you could probably pick it up instantly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to save the best for last. So let's talk about Christopher. I know you're excited. So, uh, I'm curious about first date, first impressions. Like, what was your initial feeling about Christopher?
Oh man. Okay, so our first date was in the heart of COVID. Like everything was closed. Restaurants were closed, like fast food restaurants were closed, and it was winter in freaking Michigan. So you couldn't go outside. You couldn't like go to a park and like do anything. So we have this store up here called Horrocks, which I hope Catherine took you to when you came up here, because if not, you have to go. Horrocks is like the greatest store in the entire world. It's huge, and it has like, I kid you not, every like fruit and vegetable you could ever want. They have like a whole bar where you can go like buy beer and wine to like drink while you're shopping, which I'm not a drinker, so I don't do that. But excuse me. They just have everything. I love that store. And they have a gelato bar, and you can buy like really fancy cupcakes and stuff. Um, and they have a nursery if you're into that sort of thing. Not me, because I kill plants. But so I was like, you know what? Like, let's go to Horrocks. Like, Horrocks is pretty cool. We could go to the gelato, and they have an actual bar there too. So we went there, and we went to the gelato bar, got some gelato, and then at that point in time, you couldn't sit inside. You had to go outside, but they had like big propane heater things. So we were trying to go to one of those, and then the only one available, like we were going to, wasn't working. So we were like trying to get an employee to fix it or exchange the propane tank. And it's weird because it's like your first date, and so like my first impression was like, wow, he's pretty tall.
He is a tall guy. For context, I've met Christopher a couple of times. He's very tall.
Yeah, so for context, I am 5'2". Chris is 6'2", so he's got a solid foot on me. Um, but anyway, so we just went outside, like under the propane thing after it finally got fixed, and we were just kind of talking about like basic stuff, which we met on Bumble. So we were messaging through Bumble for like 2 months prior to like actually meeting. So we had like a baseline to kind of go off of, but we were there for, I don't know, maybe an hour, 2 hours. I really don't know. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, like that wasn't terrible. I would go on a second date. So we continued talking, and our second date was watching Hamilton. Because there's nothing else to do. We couldn't do anything. So he came over and watched Hamilton. And don't you worry, like I had my pistol like hidden in the couch. He had no idea. So I was prepared, like if if he had bad intentions. But yeah, that's how JMC came to be from the start.
It's very fascinating that you had such a tumultuous experience, and then this experience just kind of flowed easily. It was just super natural, super straightforward, and sounds like you hesitated just for a minute about maybe second date, maybe not, but then once you got through it, then you were kind of full speed ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of like, I don't have a reason to not go on a second one. Like I didn't see any red flags, and he didn't make me feel like weird or creeped out or anything. So I was like, why not?
Mm-hmm. And what was the moment that you felt like this would be like a life partner or someone that you wanted to have around for a long time? Do you remember specifically?
So I definitely remember after date 3, which I don't fully remember what we did. I know he like came to my house. I think we made tacos. Because again, winter in Michigan, there's nothing to do. But after date 3, I was like, I would be pretty upset at this point, like if I never got to speak to him again. So our first date was November 23rd, 2020. We've officially started dating December 8th, 2020. And then I would say by Christmas that year, I was hooked. I was like, I would be devastated at this point if we broke up. And I went to go visit Catherine that year. in North Carolina. And I was like, and our relationship was really new, and I was telling her about it, and she's like, Jackie, like, don't do what you did with Eric, like, move too fast. I was like, Catherine, I'm not going to get married in 5 months. Okay. Like, calm down. um, but yeah, so I will admit, like, I was hooked pretty quickly, but I'm also, let's see, I was 30 at the time. So, I was 10 years wiser. I knew that, we had to take the time to like truly get to know each other, and I wasn't going to jump into anything. So there was no like worry of that happening again.
And it all worked out. And now you're married and JNC exists.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are.
So having been divorced, having experienced your parents' divorce, having children and getting remarried, how would you define love, or your conception of what love is?
That's always such a tough question, but I guess for me, and this is like human form, this is not like godly love, because that's different. But for me, like, true love is a choice. Like, you have to choose to love someone, and they have to choose to love you, because of course there's things about Christopher that I don't like, or I find annoying, or whatever, and same can be said about him to me. But you have to choose to love that person anyway. So my perception is like, you will always pick them, like, no matter what life throws at you. Like, every single marriage is going to experience like ups and downs, and you have to know that that's going to be your person to be there to support you through anything and everything you go through. And you have to understand, like, even if you don't agree, like, you can move past it. In my mind, like, divorce isn't an option. Like, I even said that when I married Eric, but you know. So like, to me, it's, you have to, I don't know how to better word that other than you have to choose them every single time. I don't know if that makes sense. I
Yeah,
hope so.
I think my understanding, I mean, it's kind of hard because I also had trouble with having an example of like good romantic love. Like, my parents don't have that kind of romantic love and never did, so I didn't have an example. So I really do associate it a lot with the biblical
Yeah.
model, unconditional sacrificial love. And I think too, just as Christians, it's kind of natural to kind of model what we want after that anyway, just because we're so used to depending on that so heavily and having so much hope in that. But I think it is, one day when that person's 60 or 70 years old and they don't look the way they did when you met them, like, what is it that you care about? Is it the ability to have unconditional, now I'm never going to turn away from you kind of relationship? Or is it more of a superficial, similar interest in hobbies, attractive kind of thing? So, for me, like I said, it's always been just the model of that biblical, unconditional, sacrificial love. So I wanted to ask about, the two of you are trying to build a family together, and you have Emmett and Grace, but you want to add to your family and have children together. So, what would you like to share about that experience?
Yeah. So, as I previously mentioned, like, Chris and I got married in July of last year, and I have two prior children from my marriage with Eric. And like, right away, like, once we were like serious, like, me and Chris started talking about like having more kids, because like before like getting into it, I wasn't sure if I wanted any more. Like, I was open to it, but I wasn't set either way. And like he said, he would like to try and have some biological kids of his own, which, don't get me wrong, like, Chris is freaking amazing with my kids. They're definitely like his kids too. But so we started initially like joking, saying we're gonna have 7 kids, like including Emmett and Grace, so like 5 more. And eventually it just kind of became a real thing, and we're like, you want 5 more kids? So, but mind you, I'm 32. Okay, so I'm not trying to have kids past 40, because I mean, I already feel like my body's against me in my 30s. It's just gonna get worse. Um, so we started trying for kids like right away, like after we got married. And then we did fall pregnant, and we found out we were pregnant on September 24th of 2022. And so obviously, like, we're super like ecstatic, like, this is awesome. and then only to find out we lost the baby 5 days later. So that it was honestly devastating. It was really difficult. And like at that time, I was 4 weeks and 6 days, so like the baby was the size of a poppy seed. So there was nothing for us to even like really see to kind of like get closure or anything. And we couldn't run any genetic testing because the baby was like too tiny and we wouldn't be able to tell what was the baby, like when I passed them. But I just kind of, or we kind of like felt that it was a girl. So we decided to name her Poppy because she was the size of a poppy seed. So Poppy May is her name. But we were still like optimistic. We're like, okay, let's try again. The doctor gave us the go ahead. Excuse me. So then we found out we were pregnant again 2 days after my birthday, which was actually, now I think about it, was the 2-year anniversary of our first date. So November 23rd, we found out we were pregnant again. So that time was a little different because we were both excited and I was personally terrified because like it was so hard, like losing Poppy. I just didn't want to experience that again. So like with my history, like I called the OB right away and she's like, okay, we're going to monitor your levels and everything. And those were looking good. Like I had low progesterone when I was pregnant with Poppy. And like it looked great this time around. So I was like, okay, that's good. And excuse me, I was starting to have like the typical pregnancy symptoms, like morning sickness, bloating, fatigue, like all of it. So I was like, this is good. This is how I felt with like Emmett and Grace, So still monitoring everything. Chris and I went in for our first like viability scan when I was 6 weeks and 5 days, which was the baby was too small to hear a heartbeat, but they could see the baby. So we confirmed that there was a baby in there. I didn't have a blighted ovum or anything. So that was great. And then we had a follow-up appointment for 2 weeks after that where we should have been able to hear the heartbeat and like determine how much the baby had grown and all that. So that was 2 days after Christmas on December 27th. And when we like went into the ultrasound and everything, I knew right away because the ultrasound tech like wasn't showing us the monitor and we weren't hearing a heartbeat. And the ultrasound tech will never tell you anything like the doctor will, but I knew. So like we finished that, excuse me, went into the other room and the first words out of the doctor's mouth was, there's no heartbeat. So that sucked a lot. So, you're hit with that information and then they're like, okay, what do you want to do? You can either pass the baby naturally, which they told us the baby stopped growing like 2 days after the last appointment. So I didn't have very much faith that my body was like going to try and, get rid of the baby on its own. Could take the pill to like try and help pass the baby, or 3, do a DNC, which is a surgical procedure. So I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'll take the pill. And that was extremely traumatic. It was really painful because I was in labor pains basically. And passing a lot of really big clots and stuff, and we were trying to look for the baby because we wanted to send them off for genetic testing and all that. After all that, I didn't pass the baby. So like I had to go get a DNC anyway, which was about 2 weeks after that. So it was just, it felt like a lot because like I felt like every time I could try and, move ahead a little bit, I got set back. So the DNC went fine and everything. And then we got the genetic results back about a week after. And we found out that this one was for sure a boy. So we named him Daniel Thomas. So it's been hard because it's like we still want babies of our own, but like with me and Chris, but it's so hard because like the thought of going through another loss again is, I can't even describe it. Like it's so incredibly difficult and it's so hard to try and explain to someone who hasn't been through it, but it's just like, you always wonder, like your whole pregnancy, you're going to be like, okay, is today the day where I'm going to, find blood or I'm going to start cramping or whatever. So it's hard. So we're kind of just trying to take it day by day. Right now we're getting like some testing done on both of us to see if we're genetic carriers for anything that could affect a potential future pregnancy. And Daniel did have trisomy 16, which the doctor said there's only a 1% chance of that happening again. But if one of us is a genetic carrier for something else, it could lead to another loss, and we don't want that. So right now we're just kind of playing it by ear, like waiting on those results and like seeing and praying about it and like talking to other people about it to try and see like what our best course of action is, because maybe we're not meant to have any more like living kids, who knows. But
yeah, it's really tough because you have to deal with that fear of what if it happens again, and I mean, I can't understand that, right? Because I haven't experienced that, but I imagine that as much as you want another, do you want another more than you don't want to experience that loss a third time? So it's kind of finding that balance. And I think what you said about talking to other people is a really good path, because other people who have gone through it can kind of share what they did or what they chose to do, and it might give you some clarity on the best next steps. And obviously prayerful deliberation and trying to have like that discernment about the best thing to do is obviously really helpful as well. It also gives you that sense of peace and comfort. So, and that's really hard though, having to figure out what the next step is going to look like. And obviously it's extremely brave if you decide to try again, but you want to be as educated as possible beforehand and things like that.
Yeah. It's definitely been a journey, but I'm at least really thankful that like I have Chris by my side. He's been like amazingly supportive and everything. So I can't complain as far as like a partner goes. So I'm very thankful I have him at least.
Yeah, we have that discussion, and it may come across extremely insensitive to listeners or viewers, but we've talked about before, somewhat jokingly, somewhat seriously, if there were a situation where I had to choose between Catherine and an unborn child, that kind of situation, what would I do? And, unapologetically, I would pick Catherine 10 times out of 10 because that's my partner, and I can go through a lot of loss and a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, but that would be the hardest loss. So, those kind of conversations are important though. People have to do that stuff because once you get married and you start building a family, those situations happen. So
yeah,
it's just a matter of being prepared and educated on what to do.
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I'm glad that you have learned a lot from your experiences. Obviously, you've grown as a person quite a bit through all of that loss and pain and difficulty. So clearly you're here, and I'm sure you feel like you know a lot more about yourself than you did 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So before we wrap, what I'd like to do with my guests, I'm sure you're already prepared. I have a series of 10 questions. They were sort of inspired by a show from the 90s inside the actor studio. But if you're down, it's a nice way to come up for air and lighten the heaviness of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. I'm extremely curious to what you're going to come up with here.
Okay.
So, number one, what is your favorite word?
Fabulous.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
So I have a couple. I really hate the word penetrate. I feel like there's great use for it. I hate it. Oh, it's cringy. I hate it. The other one, there's two more that I will refuse to say. They're very derogatory, I think. One starts with a P, and it's used to describe female anatomy. The other one is described for the same thing, but it's a C word. I hate them. If anyone ever says them for any reason, it's like instant rage. Like, I hate those words. I hate them.
That's very interesting. What excites you?
What excites me?
You're so chill and mellow. What gets you like really hype?
It makes me really happy when like deaf people don't have to work hard for like accommodations. Like there's just like you go somewhere and there's an interpreter at the event. Like they don't have to request it. It's just there. Or like videos or closed captions. Like it makes me, or anyone, equal accessibility, I will say, for like anyone, even like blind people or like wheelchair users. Like that makes me really happy and excited.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think at this point, at least in 2023, the world should have caught up, and figured out how to accommodate people with disability and things. What upsets you?
There's a lot of things. I should have thought about this better. What upsets me? People, I guess, who feel like they're better than everyone else. Like they feel like the world owes them something. Like I don't. Yeah, stuck up people. I don't like.
Entitlement.
Yeah.
What sound or noise do you love?
Kids' laughter, like especially my kids' laughter, is super great.
Sort of an aside, but I think you may be one of the few guests who it's relevant to. One thing my mom said when I was little was that even if we were separate, if we were in the kind of near vicinity of each other, she could always identify my voice specifically. Is that true for you?
For like Emmett and Grace, you mean?
Yeah,
I think so. It's harder when they're smaller because their words aren't like fully formed anyway. But I could tell Emmett's voice out of a crowd for sure. Grace probably, but she's still like she can form her words, but she still sounds like a lot of other 4-year-olds.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh my gosh, I hate the sound of pets licking themselves. It's so gross. I hate it. Like there was one time I was at my friend's house and she had a dog, and like she was sitting in the chair and their dog was laying next to her and he was just licking her hand, and this whole time I'm like internally dying because we're like talking for like 10 minutes. I'm like, this dog is licking your hand and I'm gonna lose it, but I can't say anything because it's like my friend's house. Oh my gosh, I hate that sound. Cats, dogs, hate it.
Now that I think about that, it almost kind of sounds like macking on gum. It's very similar. It's like a kind of like a slapping sound. It's very irritating.
It's so bad. Or stupid smoke detectors. When people have their smoke detectors going off when I'm like on a phone call, I'm like, I literally cannot concentrate. Please stop.
Are you, maybe you don't know, do you have misophonia?
I don't know what that means.
So like when someone's eating, the noises that they make when they eat, does that bother you?
Not so much. Not unless they're being like really like they're chewing with their mouth open and like being really obnoxious about it. But in general, no.
Okay. What motivates you to act every day when you wake up?
I mean, I guess like the really unfair, easy answer would be to say like my kids, but like God put me on this earth for a reason. Like I got to figure out what that reason is and go after it.
I think both answers are very acceptable.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think the really easy, obvious answer would be like an interpreter. But like my absolute dream job would be like to be an interpreter at one of the Titanic museums, because I also really love Titanic, like both the movie and like the story of the actual ship. Or I would love to be a theatrical interpreter, because I really enjoy theater, and that would be so fun. I would like that a lot.
What profession would you not like to do?
A lawyer. I really hate confrontation. That's like all lawyers do, is like confront people with stuff. So it sounds like,
yeah, you don't want to argue.
No.
And last question: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, it definitely does. So when I get there, I would absolutely love for him to be like, come meet your son and daughter, come meet Poppy and Daniel.
And then you have all the others there with you, like the whole family.
Yeah, it's something that's what I'd really want.
Well, I appreciate you coming and sharing an hour and talking about your experiences, and it's been a really good conversation. The setup I have with Kat is like every 10 episodes, I'm gonna make her do another one. So maybe I can get you in a rotation like that.
Perfect.
So we can do other topics. Yeah. But I'll give you the last word. Shout yourself out however you want, or say whatever you like to say, and then we're all good to go.
So we haven't like posted on there recently, just because life has given us a lot of lemons lately. But Chris and I do have a page. It's just on Facebook. We're not like we're not very good about posting, but it's literally just called JNC. We just do really dumb videos that are entertaining. So maybe check that out. Or my other PSA is just like, be nice to people. Like, it's not hard to just communicate what you want and be nice at the same time. Like, don't yell at people. It's unnecessary.
Well, I can link everything that you'd like to share too. So just let me know afterward. But again, I appreciate you. Had a really good conversation, and that's it.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.